Hello, and welcome in to episode 4 of the Bear Claw Media Podcast. I am Chris Bolin, joined as always by Ben Schleiger. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, we're doing okay. Broncos and Bears took a dive this week, but you can't win every week. So just doing what we can. How about you, Chris?
Not too bad. Luckily, UNC lost and the Broncos lost, but there's a lot of good football out there this weekend. Texas, Alabama was exciting. CU backed up what they did week 1. First Saturday, Sunday of football season, with the NFL coming back. So it's a pretty good weekend. I can't complain.
Well, and we're pretty lucky here in the state of Colorado. I mean, I don't know how many of us can afford it, but CU, CSU, they're going to have the Rocky Mountain Showdown on College game day. So that'll be amazing to have McAfee in the state. Just we probably can't afford to see him.
I know. I'd like to see. I'm sure there's a Twitter photo out there of like the ticket prices last year compared to this year. It's probably actually laughable through no doing of CSUs. That's all Coach Prime.
Yeah, from 27 to 227.
Oh, really? Damn, you found that.
Yeah, I looked on Game Time. It's about 300 a ticket right now.
Damn. And it's at Mile High again, isn't it?
No, it's on Folsom this year.
Oh, okay, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, because they gets to keep all that money. They're expected to pull in several million this year just from that game.
Damn, good on them. Maybe they could float some of it up to Greeley.
Right.
But before we get going, I just want to remind everybody to like and review this bad boy if you're enjoying what we're doing. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Give us a follow, review, comment. We want to hear what you guys want to hear. And always appreciate you listening. Seriously, means a lot to us getting this off the ground, and it's been fun so far. So we're excited to get into it.
Well, if you guys don't like what we're doing too, we always like to have a good hearty debate with you. You'll be wrong, but we'll be happy to explore it with you.
Yeah, if you like what we're doing, leave a review. If you don't like what we're doing, leave a DM in Ben's inbox.
Yeah, go for it. I'm used to
it. I guess without further ado, we should probably get into that UNC game. About what was expected, unfortunately. I think kind of nailed the preview. What did you have? 45 to 10, and it was 42-7.
Yeah, we were only 6 points off on that, so pretty proud when that happens. The first one of the season, you always got to put something positive out there, put some positive vibes. Hopefully, they'll live up to it. Didn't so with the Abilene Christian one. This one, we kind of knew what to expect. They're number 10 in the country, and they showed why. It was tough because we were pretty competitive throughout the first half. Really, we did a lot of things right, and the only time that we did something wrong, it just happened to be in a big way. And I think the confidence really tanked. Excuse me. And really, we just ran into a lack of depth in the second half where we kept trying, but we had to sub out. And when we subbed out, those guys took a few plays, a few drives to warm up, and that was just far beyond anything worth saving the game for.
Yeah, and Lamb mentioned it after the game too. Like that first half was competitive, and then the defense just got gassed. He mentioned they played about two games worth of snaps. And it wasn't super far off. They 83 plays for Incarnate Word. They put up 617 yards. But despite what the box score looks like, it was, like you mentioned, really competitive in the first half. It was 21-0 at half, but that was after kind of a back-breaking touchdown late in the second quarter. And on a couple plays where the defense looked tired, to be quite frank. Um, and kind of on that note, it was just a long game. Like it felt
Yeah.
long out in the sun, and then when I came in this morning to watch the first half again on ESPN Plus, I noticed it was 3.5 hours, which oof, that I don't think that benefited anybody. I don't know, was anybody having a good time past like hour 2.5, 3?
I mean, I'm sure all of the word fans were, but man, it was tough for UNC. The fans were getting restless. I have an awkward knee sunburn from being on the right side of our group. Yeah, it wasn't a good time for anybody. We kept on hoping for something. When we did get something good, it wasn't even necessarily because the backups had more success. It was just along the lines of the third or fourth string was in, and we just happened to have a good play call that caught them off guard. It wasn't that we didn't have that earlier in the game. It's just we built up, built up, built up, and then we'd have something that either turned the ball over or just really reset us momentum wise. One
Yeah,
of the
and
harder things.
oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, but like yeah, I think along those lines, everything like you said just felt a little off, and I like the metaphor that Lamb used about the missed field goal kind of being a microcosm of the game, where like you look in from outside and you just say the kicker he pulled it or he missed the kick, but there's like 6 steps along the way to get there. You need a good snap, you need a good hold, you need a good cadence, you need it. So there's just, and it seemed like UNC had 5 of the 6 pieces every time, and again, like
Right.
last week, anytime they'd get a big play, Incarnate Word stepped up like Abilene Christian did and just snatched all the momentum back. And then UNC just wasn't able to get anything going until, like you said, it was too late, and the third string was in, and Gibbs was able to get that pass, that long one down the middle. But yeah, it was just another long game for the offense, especially, or I guess long game for the defense because the offense struggled so much.
Right. Yeah, Lamb said that in his interview as well with us at the end, is that they played so many plays that if you broke it down, it would look better for the defense if you cut all the plays in half and worse for the offense. Um, it was just really tough. There was at least 2 plays where there could have been a breakaway catch for a touchdown. So I mean, if you add up all the mistakes, just the obvious ones alone, where it's undebatable that player had a chance to score points, we're at least looking at 17 points that we could have been. So we could have been at least halfway closer to the score. And sure, that's not going to win us the game, but that would have looked a hell of a lot better for the fans. We had a couple of the players' parents behind us, and just you felt for the team, you felt for the parents. It was just rough. Like them seeing the obvious mistakes, them being like, this guy gets it right in practice. What's he doing in the game? Like, what's going on? It was just pure agony. It was tough. Um,
Yeah, and
and there wasn't really much they could do to just right the ship. They needed some sort of stabilizer, and once they did find a stabilizer, Incarnate Word threw in something that just disrupted the whole game plan.
yeah, and you mentioned there was I think 17 points like kind of left on the board. Two really deep like throws that would have been huge in that first half. Who was the first one? Was Jamari Robinson
Yep.
dropped one right over the top. He would have walked in for the touchdown. And then the second one, I think, was it Zinicola tried to make a one-handed catch kind of over on the right sideline, right down by the goal line. That one was a little
Oh,
less
right,
egregious, but he still probably should have brought that one in. As a great throw. And then
right. I
there,
think I was thinking about one with Riles down the middle too, as well. Um, either way, it's just stuff that didn't connect, so it doesn't count. But man, it sure would have been easier on the crowd for sure. I think it's tough. Ever since Collins, like the crowd is definitely turned a little bit, and they're just so much less patient, which in one degree is good because we're not going to accept the same old, same old. But at the same time, I think they're a bit quick to get on, the lack of success. You know,
Yeah,
the Abilene Christian one, sure, we might have had a chance in that, but once we saw Abilene Christian, they're a pretty good team. Incarnate Word, they're number 10 in the country. They're undeniably good. Next week's going to be an undeniably good team as well because they're a tier up and performing well. I agree with the fans and the sentiment of like, we need to do better. We need to not miss obvious mistakes. But at the same time, these kids are trying to figure it out on the fly with an uphill battle. We got to cut them a little bit of grace.
yeah, and kind of to put a bow just on everything we've touched on so far, it felt like they feel really close to putting it together, which doesn't mean a damn thing when you're losing by 35 points. But it feels like at some point it is going to come together, and whether it's just for a game and they beat somebody you're not expecting them to beat, or come conference they actually have some tangible like progress and momentum. It feels like the recipe's there, the pieces, the ingredients are there. It just there's one of these weeks it's going to come together, and we'll have to see whether or not it sticks.
Yeah, kind of like Lamb was referencing as well, is they got about 9 players doing all the right things on most plays, and they just need those 10 and 11 just to hit the same chemistry, hit the same groove at the same time.
Great point. Um, Kind of then going off of last week, the open field tackling especially was atrocious, and good portion of that was because the D line was getting pushed around. The O line had the same problem. As a positive, it felt a lot better this week, especially the open field tackling. Um, you know
Yeah, the
that
tackling looked solid. Like I think across the board, everybody was flying to the ball. There was a lot more hustle. There was a lot more drive, a lot more determination. Especially looking back at our boys. Thankfully, that we got a roster from the fancy suites, so we can reference everybody more intelligently. Even though God just bless the pronunciations because it's going to take us a while to get those right. But
Godspeed, man.
Tama Tuateli, linebacker 45, he was all over the field. He did get a few penalties here and there, but he was trying his ass off. They even brought him in as a fullback on a run or two. Really, there was a lot of try on this team this week, and it was fantastic to see that drive. The one thing that kind of took away from some of that is our zone coverage. Some of the time we looked like a kid lost in Walmart who couldn't find his mom. It's just all of a sudden we see an Incarnate Word player. We're all yelling, "Who had that guy?" Like, ew, it was gritty because of course Zach Calzada he saw him just fine and usually turned to a big gainer points, and it was tough. You know, they were doing so much better to not be wet pasta this week. They really checked the box there, did great on it, but then they kind of looks like little kids in Walmart playing coverage.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties back to I think the first of those plays you're talking about is at the very end of the first half. It was tight all game. Yeah, the defense was swarming the ball, holding their own. They'd given up 14 points, but honestly, those took one great throw from Calzada, and then just another solid drive. But then, yeah, with what was it about? I think about 4 minutes, 3 minutes left in the first half. They just wide open down the middle, 44-yard catch, and then the next play, I think it was an 11-yard touchdown run. It looked exactly like the team has looked the last 2 years, where just back-breaking mistake, and then they just don't recover in time. It was actually kind of funny because you mentioned the parents sitting behind us. One of them was yelling, like, why are we in the prevent defense when uh, Incarnate Word was like nickel and diming us down. They put together like 3 or 4 short pass plays, a first down or two, and he was yelling about him being in prevent. And then I remember I looked over at you and I was like, as long as they can just hold them to a field goal, like we'll be okay,
Right.
just for momentum purposes. And then probably the next play, just 44 yards wide open. Calzada underthrew it like about 6 yards off his back foot, and it didn't even matter because he was just that
Right.
open.
Yeah, and that was the hard part is like even when we knew what our mistakes were, we tried to do something that should be, a 60 to 70% chance of fixing it. And it just, you know, when we would zig, they would zag. It was tough.
Yeah, and after that, the floodgates really opened. There felt like there was one more chance to kind of gain some momentum early in the third quarter. Who was it? Taiwan Harris, I think, had.
Yeah, when he stepped in front and took that ball right out of that receiver's hands, that was beautiful.
Yeah, it looked like watching it develop. It almost looked like it was going to be a pick six, and
Right.
it was a good play. Like I think the Incarnate Word receiver kind of came back to the ball, and they just ended up kind of tussling there. But and that gave UNC the ball on Incarnate's 30-yard line or so, and next play Sermon just missed an out route, just not the best throw. Um, 2 more bad plays, fourth down, he gets sacked. Incarnate Word scores 28-0, and all the game's effectively over at that point. There's still half a game, but all the air is sucked out of the stadium. It's just backbreaking. Like if that long play at the end of the first wasn't that one, that was the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, it was tough. And one of the harder things that we saw that day was actually coach in the press conference. One of the other reporters is asking pretty aggressively, like, "Hey, what's the missing link? What's missing? What do you need?" And he's taking it on the shins, and not pretty like Stefan Diggs does with a cute little GQ photo shoot with a one shin guard on. He was
Great
taking it
reference.
on the shins,
Absolutely great
where
reference.
everybody on this roster just being like, it's not these guys. Obviously, if they're not, making their assignment, making exactly what they need to do, it's on me. And I hope everybody just takes that with like the biggest sign of respect, that coach is out here taking shots. He still believes in you. Even in a 35-point loss, he still wants to see the best out of you. And I hope they don't get discouraged this week going to, a big money game at an FBS on, cable TV. Don't don't take it for granted that, you're just out there to try to get stats. Still try to represent, still try to go for the win, even if you're, the spread's 40 plus. Yeah.
Yeah, and something Ed Lamb's been very clear about too is the productive struggle is important. Like it's all about the process, not the results. Not to put words in his mouth, but that's, for lack of a better term, that's kind of what this team has been looking for in the first few weeks, and what they're going to be looking for next week, I'm sure.
Right, and I think we saw that when he was answering that question for us at the press conference. Is he could have just straight up blamed it on a tough schedule that we have no business scheduling, even though schedules are so far out. We couldn't have known that Incarnate Word would have been a somewhat of a powerhouse right now, even if it's temporary. We had no idea of that, but he's taken the team on the sense of this isn't rebuilding. This we can't be thinking like that. He's like, we're in deep water. We can start paddling and try to get back to shore, or we can be out here and die. And he's not taking the lay down and die approach. Even if they're swimming against the current, he wants to keep on going forward, because at the very least, it gives the kids something to look back on for their life, of that they worked hard and they got through something hard, even though they were at the wall of like 101 and had no chance of getting through it, but they still completed it. They might not have won the way they wanted to, or they might not have gotten the results they wanted to, but they still got through it, and they went through that productive struggle.
Yeah, and I think kind of the main theme that I kind of took out of not only this week but everything that Lamb has said up until this point is there's no excuses. Like this isn't a rebuild. We're not playing a schedule that's too tough for us. It's on them and it's on him. He's made a point to mention it's on him to come out of that and to win now, which it's encouraging to see. Hopefully it kind of bears some results come conference time.
Right. And looking at it, like, it doesn't look like Sermon's not able to be the quarterback that UNC needs him to be. It's just, on the very first drive, everything was going well. And then they kind of got cute with this triple end around flea flicker thing that just, it didn't have, the play wasn't designed to have the same timing or the same development for him to set his feet that he normally would. And when he did, he'd drop back, and it looked like he was just kind of throwing just a street pass to a friend, and it was just a hair late, and it went right into the safety's chest. It was an early interception. It was all because he was focused on following that play through as the play developed rather than the timing he felt comfortable with.
Yeah,
So if
and
he just has the time to develop and really go with the timing that's comfortable with him, he's going to be able to produce better.
yeah, and one thing I noticed that I wrote down was he looked fantastic on those deep balls. Like he throws a great go ball, and he put 3 right on the money. Like basically one was completed and 1.5 other ones should have been, but he just didn't
The
seem.
Mari one, like it floated right down and it just went right through the kid's hands. Like it was exactly where it needed to be for that player. It was nowhere near a defender. It was just great placement.
Yeah, and he had 2 others like basically just like it. But then it seemed kind of those timing throws, the intermediates, like you mentioned, that interception he threw on that first drive. There was a third down where he had a slant open and he just threw it behind him. I mentioned that out route after the interception. I don't. Again, like Lamb said, there's so many pieces to the puzzle. I don't know exactly what's going wrong, like what's going wrong there, but he doesn't seem to be exactly on the same page as his receivers a lot of the time. And kind of on that Hank Gibbs touchdown that you mentioned at the end of the game, I remember thinking when he threw that, it was kind of weird because it looked like Haggerty was about to get ran down from behind, and then the guy just kind of gave up, like about 6
Yeah,
yards
that was
out.
scary. We were just all like, "Oh, he better hold on to that thing." Like, if he drops it now, this crowd is gonna just
Oh,
erupt.
the exit gates would have been crowded if he would have got
Oh yeah,
stripped. It looked like it was setting up for that, but thankfully that didn't happen. But
yeah. The defender had to take a heart.
I remember thinking like I hope this doesn't become a talking point. Like Gibbs scored the only touchdown on a throw that Sermon would have made easily, and then
Right,
I remembered we're the only ones that would really be talking about it. I guess us in the trib. So
right.
I don't think there's any worry about Slaughter's job. I think we're going to have to get at least a couple games into conference play before there's any serious talk about a QB change.
Right. And I think like we might see some development next week since it's going to be such a lopsided game, and really health is going to be, or at least should be, one of the key talking points for the coaches. Is like, you're not feeling good, sub out. Like, let's get somebody else some time. To get them some TV cable time for their parents so they can see them on Pac-12 TV for the last time ever, I guess.
They're
But
not the
yeah,
only ones.
like Hank Gibbs, he did well. It was a great throw. Blake Haggerty, once when he made that just slight adjustment on his route, like the defender behind him stumbled a little bit. Great showing by our freshman. Great showing by the transfer QB, which I think is a junior coming in, so we might have him for some competition next year. Gibbs looks good if, God forbid, Sermon has some sort of issue at some point, which I sure hope he doesn't. I think he looked better. I think you noticed him grab at his ribs once or twice,
Yeah,
but I think overall,
there was just one time that I noticed. I think it was actually the sack on that drive
mm,
right after they got the UNC got the interception early in the third. But it didn't feel like that really. It felt a lot better than last week, and it didn't really feel like that was the reason he ended up getting pulled. I think he played at least a couple more drives after that. But
Yeah, I think they just wanted to see what Hank could do, just of like if something goes down, can this kid complete a ball? So I think he showed that. Haggerty's a great surprise because I think he's a freshman, a redshirt
yeah,
freshman. So having that early talent is going to be great for developmental later on for us. Really, it was a good showing by the backups. I don't think we have much to worry about there, but at the same time, we just prefer the we know the long ball is accurate with Sermon, so I don't think there's any usefulness in having any sort of competition talk.
yeah, I agree 100%. So I'll just leave it there. Um, Another thing I meant we kind of touched on it. Zach Calzada looked fantastic. He had a couple really good throws where he was rolling out left, like turned, fired back to the right side of the field. That first touchdown, he had another long gain. Um, great vision, great arm. I'm sure there are FBS programs he could be playing at right now. Um, but
Well, he
Incarnate
was
Word,
at Texas A&M for 2 years and then Auburn last year, so kids seen a hell of a lot of stuff coming into that UIW program.
yeah, and another thing I noticed in that like regard, Incarnate Words had a couple receivers that were just too big for UNC's secondary. There were a couple plays where it felt like they were covered pretty well, and Calzada just kind of threw it up. He put it in a great spot, and they just went up and got it. Which
Yeah, Caleb Tapman, he scored at least twice, 6'5", 220. There was one score in the far end zone where I can't remember if it was Taiwan or Tizzy. Somebody was trying to like get their hands up and try to just do something, and he just caught it right there. Just
just
that advantage was just a little bit of an extra zing that it's not that we weren't ready for. It's just it's hard to combat when a receiver is anywhere from 3 to 6 inches taller than you.
yeah, there's legitimately only so much you can do when you're giving up that much size. Um, Another thing, I guess a couple other things. Ben, feel free to hop in at any point here. These are just a few notes. Looked like a more balanced rushing attack. Afari split some carries with Darius Stewart. I think Afari had 14 for 43 yards and Stewart 13 for 32. Funny enough, Tuatelli was the second leading rusher on that one fourth down conversion. Um, he looked tough to bring down. I think he bounced off a couple guys. I think there was a nice stiff arm in there. So Lamb mentioned he was trying to keep that group on the field. So I wonder, it was kind of a hybrid field goal set. But I wonder if
Yeah, I'd love
that's
to know
something.
how that developed in practice where, linebackers always want to be like, I want to be a running back today, coach. I want to see like the footage of that behind the scenes of like how that developed. Cause I was like, 40, 45. We only got 145. He's a linebacker. What is he doing out there?
Yeah, I did. What did Lamb say? He's just a blocker on field goal unit, I think, because Green's the holder, and then obviously the kicker,
Yeah, he might be like
also Green.
we'll have to look more closely on punt. He might be one of the personal protectors, the back three
Ah,
before Green. So he might have a little bit more involvement than what we might typically look for. But yeah, he looks like plenty fine pinball out there to me.
he's rumbling, stumbling. But kind of, you just mentioned Green, the kicker slash punter. He did miss that one field goal. Box score has it at 23 yards. I remember announcers said it was a 30-yarder. I guess I'm more inclined to trust the box score. But punting, he had a phenomenal day. 9 punts, 414 yards, average of 46. On that 70-yarder he had in the second quarter that just pinned Abilene Christian inside their 5. Um, it, I mean, when you're looking at the punter for highlights, it's not ideal, but the little things matter when games are more important. That's what it's going to come down to. So it's a nice notch in the belt.
Right, and it was a beautiful kick. It was just kind of funny. Like the crowd was kind of down. The returner, he didn't back up that far. I think he backed up at like 40, 45 yards, about where the average is. You know, if somebody really booms it, he just has to scoot back a little bit. And he kicked it, just beautiful spiral punt, a little bit of wind behind it. And you could see the returner
Right.
just backpedaling, like,
Just
oh,
went.
I don't got that one. And like everybody got all excited because it took a couple bounces and we downed it like about the 3, maybe the 5. It was just, it was great to have that integral piece of, you know, the third phase per se. You know, it might not have gone perfect. He did miss an extra point, but
He
if he
missed a
can flip
field
the
goal.
field
It
position,
was
field goal, my
Incarnate
bad.
Word missed the extra point, but we had penalties, so they got to redo that one.
Right. Um, but I mean, even so, like if he can flip the field position and just give the defense some sort of a break where it's on them, you know, to just stop them before the midfield rather than being at midfield trying to stop before field goal range, that makes a world of difference on energy levels and just stress in general.
Yeah, and he did the same thing last week. Abilene had a couple long scoring drives because they started at their own 10. Um, it was funny. I was listening to the announcers, and there was a quote after UNC didn't go for it on fourth down from around the 50. And he said, if your punter's punting well, punt it. And I thought if we're already at that level in game two, I'm excited to see where the announcers go. If it's like a week 11, we're 2-8 or 2-7. Um, Another funny thing the announcer said, he said Zinicola hit in the lower stomach when he got hit in the groin, pretty obviously. I thought that was hilarious. And then the last thing that I took note, this was from Lamb in his post game press conference, and fair warning, it is taken extremely out of context. I just thought it was a funny sentence. He said, in many ways, nothing could prepare us more for our conference than these disappointing blowout losses, which he was talking about in the regard of you learn from these losses and you're better for it when you play tough in conference opponents. It just sounded funny because he's like, well, nothing could prepare us for conference like getting blown out. Like we'll be ready. We'll be ready to lose by 47 UC Davis.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a cringe quote, whether it's in context or out of context. But even so, it's just like, okay, well, I mean, there is something from learning from your mistakes, but golly gee, I
It's
don't want to learn from this many mistakes this often.
the productive struggle, Ben. I'm
Yeah.
team Ed Lamb. I will not let you sully it.
Hey,
Um
we are on a beautiful navy and gold, the gold that you like, not beautiful same old Bears gold. We're on beautiful navy and gold struggle bus, and you know the next stop we got to get to after Wazoo. We're gonna get to some wins. We will. It just might take a while.
Last thing I had written down is, do you remember that strip sack that happened? Because I couldn't remember if it was this game or a different one, but UNC put out a handy dandy 2-minute highlight clip, and it was I think the kid's last D tackle number, I think it's 20. I think his last name is Dell. He basically just ripped it out of, I think it was Calzada's hand. It bounced once and he landed on it. It was late in the third quarter. Did
You said
not.
number 20,
Yeah, what's his name?
Christian Wren,
Ren. Yeah.
redshirt freshman, 6'4", 264.
Yeah, there was funny because we were talking earlier. We saw him go flying after the play. He was trying to draw an unsportsmanlike, but he like
Hey, he was
re-earned
making an effort.
he
It just
re-earned that
wasn't the
toughness
right
card
time.
on the strip sack. Didn't lead to any points, but it was one of the cooler things that happened for the Bears in this game. Um, and then last but not least, there is nobody with a great name on this team. I went through the roster. There's some like fun ones, but no,
There's
just
someone I'd love to see the announcers try to say.
Yeah, I figured that
Um,
was in territory I didn't want to wade into, though.
yeah, fair enough. I mean, like some of these, I'm like, oh yeah, have fun, buddy. Even if you have a pronunciation key, you go for it. I'm not paid that much.
All right. There's probably something we missed, but I think we touched on just about everything. Anything you want to add onto this game? Any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
You know, I think even though it didn't go our way, I think there was things that gave us hope that if they can get uh, their stuff together, that we'll be all right. It was just it was kind of disappointing to go from arm tackling and like completions and just like a little bit of stuff here and there to just big blatant misses. I think they were just trying to overcorrect just so far. Um, I think they just need to get back to the basics. Just do the basics. Worry about health for Washington State, and just see what happens from it. Don't stress it too much. Go out there and have fun. See what happens when you're trying to have fun.
All right, well said. We will be right back. Take a look around the Big Sky and then the FCS at week 2. All right, and we are back here on the Bear Claw Media podcast presented by Bear Claw Media, though you probably know that because the feed that this podcast showed up in did not change. So Ben, let's take a look around the Big Sky. I mean, I think Montana State was in the premier game this weekend for FCS, and
Boy,
it
how
did
was
not
that a game?
disappoint.
Oh man, I rewatched that later that night after we got done with dinner, and oh, that toe tap, I felt so freaking bad. I was like, they had that one. They played better than the Jackrabbits for not a vast majority of the game, but enough of it that it counted. And I was like, man, they could have upset them, and they were about 2.5 inches of grass away from it.
I don't even know if it was that much. I mean, everybody listening who's this deep in the weeds probably knows how that game ended, but Montana State was down 16-20 with about 10 seconds left from near their 20, and threw a dart to the back of the end zone. Looked like he drug his foot, called a touchdown, and then overturned on the replay. Honestly, when I watched it live, it did look he did look out of bounds. Even kind of looking at the replay they were showing on the broadcast, but there's been a couple very convincing Twitter
Oh,
posts
yeah,
of
the
some still
screenshots
shots.
where it's like where his foot just barely touches before, and it's like, okay, how microscope are we going to get about this? Because if you go with the microscope approach, touchdown. If you go with the real time, Mike Florio type way you're supposed to judge it, there wasn't enough in.
I agree with that, but I'm kind of surprised they overturned it because they needed to reach the threshold of having enough evidence to overturn it.
Right.
Um,
I think
which
it just
they
was
felt.
just bad enough they couldn't justify leaving it where it was. And there might be some thought in their mind of like, okay, well, if it's not like 100%, just give it to the home team.
Yeah. Hopefully there's a rematch of this game though. I mean, if these two teams are kind of at the level we think there are or that we think they are, I imagine there likely will be a rematch sometime come playoff time, but you hate to see it be at least even this much up in the air because it does feel like there's a legitimate question to the outcome of this game.
I
I
think there's
think
also a question of if Tommy Mlott was healthy, because he was 6 for 6, in the first half, and coming out into the third, the announcers kept on being like, "Well, where's he at?" And then they panned to him on the sideline. Well, he's there. And then they a couple plays later they'd update he's limping, and it's like, oh gosh, like it always seems like it comes down to injuries with Montana State, as they have the dream roster, They got impeccable talent, and then it gets hurt or something. They're like the San Francisco 49ers. They're meant to be in the ship, but they just once they get there, it's just they're not healthy enough because they're too banged up, scratching and clawing, getting there. I'd love to see this game again. The one thing I really want from it though is to be on opposite sides of the bracket. Like if
Yeah,
this
no, if
game rematches on the same side of the bracket before Frisco, uh, I don't know. Like that would have a high expectation for Frisco to be even better than that.
yeah, and again, you never know how the season's going to play out, but this feels like it could be a rematch in the national title game, and hopefully, a game like this doesn't. I guess hopefully it either doesn't impact the voters' minds enough, or it impacts their minds just enough that they end up on opposite sides of the bracket. But we'll probably come back to this game in just a bit. Idaho 33, Nevada 6. The Vandals a 6-point favorite against FBS Idaho. Admittedly not a powerhouse, probably one of the cellar dwellers of the Mountain West, but that's impressive. Again, don't want to talk about this one for too long because I think we're going to come back to it. But any just off the top thoughts about that Idaho Nevada game?
I I did not keep up with this score. I'm not sure when this one was happening. I was busy, but I went back and checked the final score because I was like, "Ooh, did we get a fear the FCS moment on it?" And I was like, 33-6. Oh my goodness, they took knockoff Las Vegas, bent him over a fence post, and spanked the crap out of him. Like goodness. I think one of the cooler things too is like as excited as they should be about it, that their coach Jason Eck, cool little South Dakota State connection there. He put out this fun little video of all the guys on the plane before they're about to take off of like, oh, this is the first time we beat Reno since 98, 99, something like that. And, how do you feel about it, guys? And they all roar in the background. They're all like cheering and whooping. Like, that is a fun environment over there in Moscow, and those guys should be proud.
All right, and the kind of last primo game of the Big Sky weekend, Weber State taking care of business against Northern Iowa, 34-7. It was 17-17 at halftime, and Northern Iowa was actually leading 17-14 at one point, and then Weber just 20 unanswered, end of the first, into the second half, and just put UNI out of their misery, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
I was actually so I've been a bit of a roller coaster for only 2 weeks of games. When we came into the season and did those preseason polls, I was pretty high on Weber State. I think we had them at number 3. They're kind of tied for number 2. But I think I had them when I voted at number 2. And then as I kind of heard more, saw more, my confidence waned, but this brought it back for me. Solid win. Who knows how good Northern Iowa is going to end up being? But at the moment, it looks like one of the best wins for a Big Sky program so far. Probably second behind that Idaho win.
Yeah, I think this solidly put Weber State as the third best team in the Big Sky. No doubt about it. I never really have believed in Weber State's passing game ever since we were in college. Uh, you can
Happy
shout out
Tuesday.
back to my lovely puns and ripping of Jake Constantine to the point where his mom got in my DM saying what a nice boy he was. But Weber historically has never had a good passing, and this was not a good passing by any degree. But the rushing was just outstanding from Damon Bankston. 22 carries for 144 yards, 3 touchdowns. They went absolutely nuts on the ground. And for Theo Day being touted as this, you know, huge deal as a quarterback, he's going to take over the FCS, he's going to run things. He got sacked 5 times and picked off 3. Weber's defense is something to be scared of. This is going to be an ongoing problem, and the Wildcats might not kill you through the air, but they'll scratch and claw you any other way.
Yeah, just a great win. And again, we'll probably talk about that one a little more. The last interesting, there was a couple interesting ones, but the last one I'd really want to highlight is probably Eastern Washington taking Fresno State FBS to two overtimes. Um, who knows the circumstances where Fresno State's going to end up this year, but I think that instills a little more confidence in me for this Eastern Washington team that I was kind of honestly didn't plan to think that much about this season.
Yeah, I think they're still kind of even with a fantastic performance. I think they're going to end up about mid grade just because there's some absolute killers in the Big Sky. Um, I think they had a great performance. It's a damn shame they couldn't get that win because I feel like they were definitely a better team that night, and it was a good team loss. I know that sounds stupid, and there's no such thing as a moral victory, but they should be damn proud of taking a FBS team to a second overtime and nearly winning it. They were very close in that, and I think that never say die attitude is still alive in Eastern Washington. They just have to prove that in conference play.
Yeah, so little spoiler, they get approved that before conference play next week. They take on Southeastern Louisiana. Um, but the last couple notes I had about this week in the Big Sky, um, Portland State and Northern Arizona, they looked better to me, both coming off a big week one losses. Portland State held their own against Wyoming, and then lost my spot. And then Northern Arizona looked all right against North Dakota. Nothing world beating, but it seemed like they had better performances this week. And then Idaho State and Cal Poly kind of fell back to where we thought they'd be. Idaho State losing by I believe 50 on the dot to Utah State, and then
Yeah,
Cal
ooh, that looks
Poly
like a basketball score there, 28-78 right there.
and
Yeah,
Cal
I think
Poly
mostly
that win against San Diego last week looks a lot less impressive after San Diego lost to D2 Colorado Mesa.
oh
But
man,
sorry,
we
what were
were
you saying?
keeping tabs on that during the UNC game, and we're like, they're tied. Why are they tied? Like, go Mesa. Why are they tied? And
Yeah,
then
I
it was
went
like
from
go overtime, and then it's like wow, 28-21. They took them in overtime, and Sicko's committee had a great play. We were looking up during the Bears game because unfortunately we needed some sort of happiness, and the lineman scooped up a fumble, threw a great little touch pass to the running back, and got a touchdown out of the deal. Like go Mesa, but I feel bad for Brandon Moore, our buddy from Mines, who went up to San Diego.
up
Yeah,
to.
that lack of scholarships just it bit him in the ass.
Yeah, and I'm exaggerating. That was a step up, and he proved at Mines that he's probably going to be able to build a good team, but it's going to take a minute. And it was funny. First off, that play number 3, Sports Center top 10 yesterday.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, I started that game rooting for San Diego because of that Brandon Moore connection. And then as I think the fourth quarter was ending, I was like, wait a minute, why am I not cheering for Mesa? Like this, everything about this feels like I should be pulling for Mesa.
Right.
Um, but uh, before we get into the weeds on kind of the power rankings of the Big Sky here, any other highlights you had from this last week that you want to touch on?
I think it's just notable with common opponents that Montana played Utah Tech, and even though it was a road game, um, they did win by 30. It seemed less convincing than Montana State's 63-20. I common opponents can only get you so far in stats and analytics, but as far as we're looking at it, Montana obviously is a decent team, but I think they're still trending down from what the good old Grizz expect them to be at this point in the year.
Yeah, and I think we agree on that. I think you're still a little higher on Montana than me, and maybe than consensus. But let's get into that now. So the Tubs at the Club puts out a Big Sky Conference power ranking every week, and nice enough of Brian to invite Ben to be a part of that, and then nice enough of Ben to also add me to the group chat. So we both voted on that this week. And probably one of us or both of us will tweet out what I had and then what Ben had. So if you want a visual while looking at this,
You really
I
want
guess
me to get killed on Twitter, huh?
it's all about engagement. Come on.
That's fair.
Um,
That's fair.
I think let's start at the top. This is probably a debate to be had at this point. I have Montana State number one, even after that loss. You have Idaho number one after a convincing win against Nevada. I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer. Like I didn't think that hard about it, but I did think about it. You know, like I considered
Right.
putting Idaho number one. Why do you think Idaho deserves that number one spot? And then I'll come back with a counter unless you make me change my mind.
I had to put him number one since I put UNC 11 because otherwise Tubbs of the Club would kill me. No. I did put him number one based off of it's a power ranking, not the top 25. And power ranking, Idaho went out. They spanked an FBS team. They absolutely took him to the woodshed, sent him packing. They're going to go play, Keno in their smoky casinos and cry. And Montana State had an instant classic game that just didn't go their way. What worries me, though, is if Tommy Malott's hurt, we saw at Wyoming Sean Chambers struggle as the solo number one quarterback. And I think in the FCS, he has a little bit of an edge because he is just a little bit better of a player on average versus the FCS than he is versus the FBS. I think he's below average there. But he has undeniable strength and willpower to just put his head down and go through a line, even though it makes me worried as hell as a sideline, couch potato coach. But I think Idaho has a fiery offense and a good enough defense that they could keep going deep into the conference title conversation. In Montana State, they have all the pieces. I just worry about can they get into the end zone? I know they can get down to it, but are they going to be kicking field goals more often because they're running their asses off and they don't have a passing game?
And that kind of came into play in that last drive yesterday. You could hear the announcers saying like, "Why would they throw it now? If they haven't thrown it." I think it was 3rd and 7. They ran a QB power with Chambers. We should, I guess, for clarity's sake, was Malott went down in the second quarter, I believe.
I believe it was the first half because in
Yeah.
the third quarter they were looking for him, pan to him on the bench, and then a few plays later or a drive later they mentioned that he was limping. So hopefully for Malott, he's able to just tape it up, spat it up, and be able to ready to go. But as we know as UNC, sometimes things are game to game.
Yeah, and I think honestly, Montana State can probably survive Big Sky play without Tommy Malott. Like Sean Chambers is plenty capable, but when you get into the top tier competition like San Diego or South Dakota State, it's only about the 15th time I've called them San Diego State.
Come on, ESPN.
You notice like you miss him, and they missed him. I guess I don't have any problem with Idaho being number one because, like you mentioned, it's a power ranking. It's not who we think's the best team is, who's going to win the Big Sky. I guess when I thought about it, though, my main takeaway was I feel like there I go again. The South Dakota State team that Montana State played is probably a step above the Nevada team that Idaho blew out. It's
Oh yeah.
there's no way of really proving that because you're only going to get like so many common opponents, if any. And Nevada FBS playing a much tougher schedule for the rest of the season. And just that, along with maybe I'm doubting it more than the average bear. No pun intended. Um, but I, I'm not convinced that South Dakota State was any better than Montana State. And I'm not convinced that they deserve to win that game. But I think luckily week 8 we get to see Idaho versus Montana State. They seem complete opposites in the way they handle things. Montana State's that ground and pound, just gonna run it off tackle 60 times a game. That might be an exaggeration, but and then Idaho's going to throw it around the field. Giovanni McCoy, Hunter Hayden. I'm excited for that one. We're looking forward a little bit, but I think that's probably going to be the game that decides the Big Sky Conference because admittedly, I was an Idaho doubter going into the season, but I think I am completely off of that position by now.
Yeah, I think they've done enough to solidify where they're at and where they want to go. But at the same time, they need to just keep on keeping on because as soon as Montana State slips up, they got to show that they have the willpower and the roster to be able to pick up that slack and take over the reins. Um, I mean, Montana State's going to have looking ahead, like they're going to have an easy game this week, so maybe that they can just rest them up because a week afterwards they go to Weber State. Um, if Malot's not healthy for that, that could be ugly.
Yeah, Ben, you're killing it again. Great transition. That takes us number 3. Both of us have Weber State as the third best team. I think you said that the win over Northern Iowa makes them definitively the third best team in your eyes in the Big Sky. I questioned it a little bit more, but I came to the same conclusion. They've proved it. They're the only other team with as convincing of a win as they have. Honestly, that in Idaho, the most convincing wins in the Big Sky so far, like I said. And then we differ a little bit on 4, 5, and 6. I have it as UC Davis, Sac State, and then Montana. You have Sac State, Montana, then UC Davis. I guess kind of from consensus that I've seen, UC Davis is generally, I think, a little higher regarded than Montana this season. What made you believe in the Grizz?
That's such an ugly sentence. Let's go back in time and never say that again.
Okay, let me rephrase. What what
I don't
hasn't
know that I
UC
believe
Davis
more in
done
the
to
grid. I
convince
just
you up
think
until this point?
I think that Sac State and Montana have more pedigree and history, at least recently, with success in the Big Sky. Because UC Davis, each time they have a playoff type season, they hit their high and they have a roller coaster low and they drop back down. They're really good when they're good, and they're kind of iffy when they're mediocre. I think Sac State still has a good roster. I think even though I want to put them on the Fear the FCS watch next week against Stanford, since Stanford's just such a boiling pot of mess with all this realignment and their roster woes and whatnot.
So is Washington State, by the way, realignment wise.
Well, they also trump CSU, so we know that there's some proven success there. Stanford, I don't know.
No, I agree. I'd
love to put that on the watch list. I'm going to leave that as a fringe, but Sac State, they're just so close to when they were dominant. Montana always just they do above average, and that's just kind of that's the status quo for this second reign of Bobby Hauck. And I love UC Davis. I know they have an easy schedule. I'm just not convinced at this point. I mean, like, you can't take much away from 55-7 against Oregon State. There's not much you can take away from that one. And their week 1 against Texas A&M Commerce, beating them by 38 points. That's fantastic. They're also transitioning up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an essential D2 plus win in my book, and a loss. You got a money game to an FBS team that's honestly pretty good. Again, they're also in that bubble. We're just talking about realignment all over the place because we're playing all of the teams that are affected
I
by it.
love how both teams left without a conference or top 25 at the moment, and like fairly convincingly.
Right, it's wild.
But
And I don't think we learned much from the Southern Utah game either. So that's where I'm like, I don't have anything against UC Davis. They're still in our top half of the conference. Like how we talked at the beginning, is the playoff teams and the spoilers are 1 through 6, and 7 through 12 are the ones who are trying to get stats, having fun, or just playing football just for the hell of it.
yeah, and I think honestly, I may just be lower on Montana due to their history, because they're not the bar has been set higher for them, I feel like, than UC Davis, and maybe that's the criteria I'm judging these rankings off of. Because you're right, it's so hard to tell this early on with both teams' schedules. It There's no way of telling. It'll shake itself out, and one of us will be proven right, and the other will be wrong. And
Well, I
then
mean, it's hard when we're betting on roller coaster, UC Davis versus mediocre plus Montana. Like, which one's going to falter? Because they both do at some point.
yeah, like it exactly. And kind of moving on, Eastern Washington, impressive, but I don't think it did enough for either of us to think of them as in that level with the top teams. Still to be seen, but I feel fairly confident in having them 7. That's one we agree on. And then
Yeah,
so
I think they're the leader of the second tier.
exactly, I almost consider them a tier of their own. It feels I ca- so I have Portland State number 8. You have Idaho State 8. I would consider Eastern Washington a solid level above both of those teams, and any of
Hmm.
the kind of bottom dwellers, for lack of a better term. That is where it gets a little bit interesting between the two of us, at least. I feel like UNC is pretty convincingly in that bottom spot, just with what they've shown the last 2 weeks. I've wanted to believe, I want to believe, but I think just proof is in the pudding so far, and there's time for it to change. But so I have UNC last at 12 and Portland State number 8. But you have UNC at 11 and Portland State in that last spot, which you certified Portland State hater, Ben, because you had them lower in the preseason polls too. Please explain to the audience your hatred for Portland State and the greater Pacific Northwest.
Oh boy. It's probably because I like potatoes too much, and I've you know, just have that Tubs of the Club vodka in my stream of just top five Portland State. Has just been depressing. Because even with their top five recruiting class a couple years ago, even with Bruce Barnum, a notably respectable coach in the Big Sky, even with Anthony Adams, their star secondary player a few years ago, uh, they can't do much other than spoil UNC in their 6-5 season from going to the playoffs, and just spoil other people, even if they're playing at a damn soccer stadium instead of a high school stadium instead of their own on campus stadium. Um, I think the game against Oregon was absolutely disrespectful, and poor Puddles the Duck, I felt worse for him than I did for the Vikings. And I just don't think we learn a lot from 31-17 against Wyoming, who, yeah, it's a game right after they had a double overtime against a team that was, a little bit more talented than them. They come out to just kind of like a leisurely FCS game. I mean, 17 points, good for them. I'm glad that they, were able to get that on them. But it's also a mismatch in styles. So I would be disappointed if they didn't get double digits. We could have scored 24 points ourselves against a top 10 FCS team this week if we were just a little bit more composed. So I feel like if you could put it 11.5 for both of us, we'd both be there. But, I just don't think UNC is going to be the worst. We haven't been the bottom of the conference, I think, since 2010, 2011. We've always been second to last or third to last. So,
just keeping our heads
I'm just
above water, baby.
exactly. We're doing the good old bear paddle. And as long as we continue doing the bear paddle, we'll not be technically last. The rest of the filler teams in there, I think Idaho State had a great first week, rough second week. NAU, they had an awful first week and an okay second week. Cal Poly, I'm not sure people even know they play football after getting butt whooped by San Jose State, who's not so great in the Mountain West,
Who lost
59
by
to
a
3.
similar score to Oregon
mean,
State last week.
Yeah, at least their pockets are full. There's that.
Hey, that's what we're going to be telling ourselves next week. So,
That's true.
I'll leave the rest of that. Like I said, we'll tweet those out if you're interested. Happy to debate you there.
One thing I will say on my Pacific Northwest hate, I don't actually hate it, but spicy take of the week, Pete's Coffee over Starbucks every single damn day.
Well, what a better way to move on from the Big Sky to the greater FCS. After going 0-42 last week against FBS opponents, the FCS picked up 3.5, I guess I'd say, wins. Southern Illinois.
I'd count the transitional.
Oh, what was that?
I'd count the transitional win. I mean, if Kennesaw already has their paperwork in and they're just waiting to, play their actual FBS schedule, I think technically it counts.
All right, let's call it then. Who beat Kennesaw again?
It was Chattanooga. They got them 27-20.
Okay, sweet. And those added to Southern Illinois, picked up the first FCS win against Northern Illinois, 14-11. They were number 24 in this week's FCS poll, so they'll surely move up. Then we already talked about Idaho beating Nevada, and then Fordham, who was unranked, not even receiving votes, beat FBS Buffalo 40-37. So we'll see what sort of respect they get moving into next week. Any of those games stick out to you, I guess, besides Idaho, because we've already touched on that enough?
I mean, Chattanooga was good a couple years ago, so I don't think it's a surprise that program has quality to it. And Kennesaw being a transitional team, I mean, it's going to go through a lot of changes. Not everything's going to look the same, kind of like how Jacksonville State, they moved up. They got Rich Rod on staff instead of John Grass. Kind of just set a tone of they're not okay with just, hitting the playoffs. They want to actually get some hardware and whatnot. So I think in a transitional period like that, it's kind of a soft spot in the armor. Southern Illinois, traditionally a good team the last couple years in the Missouri Valley. And then I think Fordham probably getting some sweet action over there with Buffalo and coming out on top. I think that's a surprising one. That's kind of a nice little cherry topper we didn't expect. Idaho whooping up on Nevada. I think we expected, but
folks expected it. Maybe not quite that bad though.
Yeah, that's a hell of a statement, and I would love to see just like a crime scene reporter go up and interview Nevada fans and just be like, "How are you feeling? What's next for you?"
Yeah, well, I think you put it well, and based on the fact that we're already like at an hour and 15 minutes, I will keep her moving along. Boston College just escaped Holy Cross 31-28. That could have been the fifth FCS over FBS win. Then Western Carolina beat Samford 30-7 in kind of the FCS on FCS upset of the week, I guess I'd call it. Samford ran the table last year in the Southern Conference. They were ranked number 8, surely to move down by the time this podcast comes out. Honestly, any thoughts on either of those games, Ben?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a little bit of a shocker there. I mean, Western Carolina, they're kind of a team you not really paying attention to, and for them to come out and put the hurt on Samford, that's something to take notice of going forward.
Yeah. And then I guess in a few games we talked about last week, South Carolina beat Furman 47-21. Michigan State took care of Richmond 45-14. And then North Dakota State 44-7 over Maine, who sneakily Maine on a, I think, 7-game losing streak, which is tied for, I think, third or fourth longest in the FCS, which caught me a little off guard because they've been competitive. They haven't been phenomenal by any means, but they've seems like they compete. Um, and all right, well, any big FCS takeaways this week, Ben, that we didn't touch on, or anything else you want to preview before we move on to week 3?
No, I think we hammered it pretty well. Week 2 had a lot of excitement. Week 3, we might be looking a little bit more chalk across the entire landscape.
Awesome. Well, we will get into that in just a sec after we take a quick break. All right, Ben, we are back. So let's take a look. We've actually touched on it pretty heavy, but UNC heading to Pullman to take on Washington State next week. The Cougars ranked number 23 now in the AP FBS Top 25 poll, after beating CSU 50-24 in week 1, and then the upset over number 9 Wisconsin. First year coach Luke Fickell, some high expectations there. Like we said, this is going to be a productive struggle game. The Cougars looking very good with last year's Incarnate Word quarterback Cam Ward. He had 450 yards in week 1 and another 212 last week, so over 300 a game. His main target, Lincoln Victor, who is at over 100 yards a game and had a touchdown last week. What are your overall thoughts on Washington State, Ben? We've talked about it a bit, but this one, what are you thinking?
Really, Washington State should scare us more than usual because of transfer quarterback Cam Ward. He is the reason why Incarnate Word is in the driver's seat that they are now. They were 10-3 with him his first season there, and 12-2 the second time, and they made the playoffs both times. Went quarterfinals first time, semifinals second, and he's a dangerous passer. I think I was looking at Phil Steele's top 50 quarterbacks in the FCS in the FBS, and he was right in the low 30s in there. So this guy is absolutely danger through the air. Doesn't mean he can't rush, but this will be an air raid attack on us. And if they can do anything like what Incarnate Word can, we're going to see a pretty high number on their side of the scoreboard. I think overall UNC can find little pieces to make up in garbage time, but as far as like starters versus starters, it's going to be a little bit of a worry. I mean, like CSU, they don't have exactly small kids up there, and we have pretty decently sized kids too as well, but they got moved around. That's going to be my worry, is how much production can we have, and I mean it might even get to the point where they switch to running at a certain point just to protect Cam Ward at a certain point in the game, but we're going to have to defend the passing game for our lives and just keep the running game at bay.
Yeah, and you nailed it. They want to throw the ball. Cam Ward actually has been their leading rusher the last 2 weeks, but it was with 40 yards and 43 yards. So they're going to kill you through the air, which is a little bit unfortunate for the Bears because maybe correct me if you disagree, but it feels like the secondary is kind of a strength of this Bears team. But if you're going up against a Power 5 program who the strength of their team is their passing game, I don't think it really bodes well for UNC necessarily.
And I think we're still finding our identity. I mean, with us expecting Hogue to come back at some point, I would not bet on this game. I would say, if anything, he comes back week 4. From the information we have, it's not definitive on when he comes back. So I would say don't expect him this game because really, what's the point? Do you want to just get him hurt against big, nasty FBS guys? I wouldn't. So I mean, we saw Vincent King was our MVP of the week, at least according to Bears social media. I would probably echo that he was one of the key contributors to our success this last week. And he's playing all over the field. He's playing edge. He's playing outside linebacker. He lined up man to man on a spread formation. I mean, he's playing so many different positions because he is a utility player, which is fantastic. But he's also not in all of the positions that he's used to having success in. So he's trying to spread his success to other positions for the better of the team, which is fantastic and commendable. But at the same time, we're not getting the optimal performance out of him because he's playing at an above average level across the field. So I think between Napke kind of coming down into the front 7 rather being in the secondary, Cam Murray being in the safety position rather than corner, I think we're still trying to form our identity, and this is going to be a tough time to solidify that. I think the first week, maybe first 2 weeks of conference play is when we'll really know what the Bears defense is all about. But like you said, our strengths definitely rely in the linebackers and secondary.
Yeah, and just looking for another matchup that might favor UNC, I kind of noted down if Hogue does come back, which you make a good point. It doesn't make a ton of sense for him to return this week. The pass rush might be able to get home between him and King. The Cougars let up 4 sacks against Wisconsin last week and 3 the week before against Colorado State. Part of that's just the nature of throwing the ball so much. The defense is going to get to you occasionally, but I don't think that's too much to focus on because like you said, I don't think Hogue's going to return this week.
Well,
But
shoot, maybe we should just have three down linemen, blitz Napke and King every single play, and just have 6 corners out there trying their best.
you're right though. King has looked great, but I think he's been in the positions to help the team succeed the most, but I don't think he's necessarily been in the positions to help himself succeed. And that'll probably take care of itself a lot if Hogue is able to return, which it does sound thankfully like it's not anything season ending, but we just kind of keep an eye on when he's going to be coming back.
Yeah, he looked decent on the sideline. I mean, like he was just in sweats, not doing anything besides out there just supporting his team and whatnot. But it was good to see him on the sideline. He's walking around, didn't have a brace, so we can at least have some hope that no matter when he does come back, that he'll be able to be relatively full strength.
Nice. And I guess last couple fun facts I had. This is Washington State's second straight 2-0 start. Did it last year, did it this year. Doesn't mean anything, but fun fact nonetheless. And then these two have played one other time, 2019. UNC lost 59-17. You probably won't be surprised to know Jacob Knipp was still the starter at that point. In my head, that's way too late, but he did play for 6 years, so I guess it's more surprising that he was still starting because it must have been early in the season, or he would not have been playing in that game historically. Nice. And I guess that's all I have about the Bears and Abilene. That's all I have about the Bears and Washington State. Anything you want to add there, Ben?
No, I think this is going to be one of those games where we hope a couple players can show out on national TV. I mean, as well as the Pac-12 network is broadcasted. Um, but I mean, like it'll be a nice, like, kind of bright home game of like, hey, I played against these guys. It's all going to be about, for me, of just seeing them improve the basics. We lacked the basics week one, and then we did the fun stuff well week two, but lacked the basics. So maybe we can put it all together. And of course, we're not gonna have an outstanding performance necessarily, but at least if we could have good basics and have some productive plays here or there where it's like maybe we cause a turnover or two, maybe a guy has a good long run, a good catch for 20 yards or so, just something that we can hang our hat on, besides just collecting a check.
Nice. And so let's move forward to the Big Sky, week 3. We touched on it a bit when we were talking about last week. Not a ton. I think last week definitely had a more marquee slate. But Idaho has another chance to pull off an FBS win. They play Cal, who I severely doubt the Vandals will be favored in that one. Cal's a much better team this year than Nevada. They just coming off a 14-10 loss to Auburn, which is generally impressive for the Cal program. Auburn's supposed to be taking a step forward in the SEC this year. They were able to keep that one pretty close. You think Idaho has any chance against Cal? I think there's definitely an opportunity, but I don't think it's going to come nearly as easy as it did this week.
If it is a Vandal win, it's only going to be by a couple potatoes rather than several sacks this last week. Do they have the potential to do it? Sure, of course they do. But like you said, Cal is not a dumpster. They definitely have some quality to them. 14-10 against Auburn, it's a loss, but it's a good loss. So in the big scheme of things, I think it could be close. I think Idaho is going to show a lot of good things. Out of everybody who could get a fear the FCS moment, I think they're still a candidate, but it's more of a fringe candidate rather than a solid one.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see by the time this podcast comes out how much that win over Nevada impacted the Vandals' top 25 looks. But with this week and a potential win next week, Idaho could be looking at some top 2, if not best team in the country buzz if they can pull off back-to-back FBS wins. Next, I have Montana hosting Ferris State, defending D2 national champion. They're 2-0 so far this year and won 11 straight going back to last season. A game the Grizzlies really should take care of, but it has a little intrigue, just the defending D2 champion coming into Missoula and giving the Grizz a run for their money potentially.
God, I want to know so badly who thought this was a good idea. Again, games are scheduled out so far out, you can't necessarily avoid some things. We didn't know that Incarnate Word was going to be an absolute powerhouse thanks to Cam Ward and company. Ferris State has always had some sort of success at the DT level. I think this was a big oversight by the Montana administration. They need to come out and just absolutely whoop them. Be like, yep, those guys don't deserve to be in the FCS yet. We whooped them by 25, 30 points. They need to beat them more than they beat Butler. If they don't, they should be worried. Season ticket holders should be worried. Everybody in Missoula should be sharpening their pitchforks for when they storm the castle at night. Ferris State is not something to scoff at, and if they somehow go in there and get a win over Montana, that will be just an absolute S show of
Hilarious,
26,000,
hilarious for everybody else. But
right? Yeah, 26,000 angry, drunk Montanans that just don't know what to do with their life because the Grizz lost to a D2. I don't think it'll go that way, but man, they better beat Ferris State well.
you're right, though. This game just doesn't make any sense. Ferris State's in Big Rapids, Michigan. It's not even a close drive. But you're right. I mean, not hopefully, but in theory, Montana is going to take care of business in that one. Um,
It's like UNC trying to schedule the School of Mines. Like School of Mines has been in the playoffs and RMAC champion so many times. Like it's not
yeah,
it doesn't benefit us to
at
do
least
it.
they don't
So
have like School of Mines wouldn't have to fly 2 hours to get to,
that's true.
like
That's
that
true.
one
They
at
would just
least
charter
like
a Greyhound.
makes sense geographically.
Right.
But not to harp on that one too much. The last real game that kind of piques my interest in the Big Sky next week is Eastern Washington hosting top 25 Southeastern Louisiana. I'm going to leave it at top 25 because who knows how this next batch of rankings is gonna shake out. Coming into this week, I don't think that game would have been of too much interest to me, but Eastern Washington looked good against Fresno State, so
Yeah,
it's worth
that
at
that
least
double
keeping an eye
overtime
on.
loss. Right. Um, looking at that, I think it's interesting. Like they both used to be dominant passer programs that had dominant quarterbacks, and they kind of taken a step back. So we'll kind of see where they end up.
Nice. And kind of expanding out to the greater FCS, I think there's really two that kind of pique my interest. Mostly those Southern Illinois at Southeastern Missouri is probably the marquee matchup there. Top 25, potentially top 20 by the time that game comes. The Salukis picking up the big win over Northern Illinois last week or this week, whatever you want to call it. That one will be interesting. What do you have any big thoughts on that one or?
I'm just gonna. I don't have a dog in that fight. I think. I think if anything, I would favor the Salukis just a smidge. But the Redbirds are traditionally a tough team, and they've had some success in the top 25 over the last decade. So I think that could be an either or type of game. Um, and I'd love to see what comes out of it because whoever comes out is going to have an edge going into their week 4.
Yeah. And the other kind of relevant matchup, it's probably more relevant to us as UNC fans. Um, but still one of the bigger games nationally is Incarnate Word at Abilene Christian. The Bears two opponents so far this year. I think this could actually be a very good game. I may be higher on Abilene Christian than average, but I think they're going to end the season in the top 25. I think they're going to compete in that new conference. And I think they're going to give Incarnate Word a run for their money. A real clash of the styles. Incarnate Word looking to whip the ball around the field, throw it, and Abilene Christian really just run it down your throat, bigger, stronger. Anything in particular in that one?
Honestly, I think this is just so intriguing since like it's similar styles, similar heritage from where they come from and whatnot, and it's really just like a smidge above versus a smidge below. It's like a minus versus a B plus. I think even though it might not have the little subsidiary next to it of having a top 25 matchup next to it. I think that would definitely be um, probably one of the most competitive games and one of the best games of the week outside of SEMO and Southern Illinois.
Yeah, it was very validating for me personally to hear Ed Lamb also mention how he wouldn't be surprised if Abilene Christian ends up being a power in that conference this year. Because honestly, that was one of my big takeaways from that game. Is as bad as UNC looked, Abilene looked like a legit, just good team, tight team, did everything they needed to do. Um, and then Holy Cross plays Yale. Holy Cross looking to bounce back after that close loss to BC. Yale's weird. Receiving votes just hasn't played a game yet. The old first 2 weeks bye strategy, really postpone having to play any games. I don't really have anything else on that one. And then
I
last,
think the Ivy League's just so hard to expect anything from because, Princeton and Dartmouth, they've been in the top 25 before, but they pull the cop out of testing and end of the year for why they don't do playoffs and whatnot. So it's always hard to measure where the Ivies are at, but usually the top three of the Ivies are pretty darn competitive and have some real dogs that come out of them. A lot of NFL players come out of there, so I think it's going to be intriguing because Holy Cross won't have a lot of tape on them at all.
yeah, and I guess last and potentially least, but potentially not least, Samford heads to Auburn. Not particularly notable other than the fact that Samford's likely going to start 0-2 after being projected to win that conference again. Then they go they host Chattanooga the next week, which will also not be a cupcake. So just something to keep an eye at, or something to keep an eye on. Samford may have a rough start out of the gate, more so than they already have, honestly. And all right, we will cut that little pause out, but I think that will do it for us here at Bear Claw Media. Thanks for listening. Again, please rate, review, subscribe, like, follow, tell your friends, all of the above. It really means a
Review,
lot to us.
repost.
But we really appreciate it. Again, thanks for listening. I've been Chris Bolin, joined by Ben Schleiger. Everybody have a great day.